Good morning. Brother Chad Long, Delhi Baptist Church here. This is free advertising for True Choice. Now, for those who don't know, Central Texas Life Care in San Marcos, or Hays County over there, has now become True Choice. And there's marketing reasons for that, I'm sure, but to me it's easier, quicker to say than CTLC or Central Texas Life Care. Anyway, it is a pro-life organization that works very hard to spread the gospel and to help young women make the choice for life. In fact, the back of the shirt says, and I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but I'll try. I'll read it to you if not. But it says, I don't even remember what it says. It says, goal for today, I think, let the tiny humans, keep the tiny humans alive. So I guess their way of wording that, tiny humans as opposed to babies, is just to remind people that they are people, they're human beings, and that while I'm not trying to minimize the importance of justice or whatever it is people are marching about. I'm not trying to minimize the importance of people's agendas. I mean, I'm sure there are legitimate people who are worried about injustices and things going on in the world, and I'm not going to try to belittle or minimize or make fun of other people's causes. But these tiny humans, there's over 1 million of them a year. Last time I looked it up, it was 1.2 million a year, maybe more, maybe a little less, but roughly 1 million babies a year are killed. And for all the things that we've ever called genocide, this would qualify as a type of genocide. But anyway, I don't want to be morbid this morning. I just wanted to do a little free advertising for True Choice. If you know somebody who's struggling with that decision or who wants to take parenting classes, they're all free. True Choice offers and they have supplies, needs for babies and children up to, I want to say, 3 or 4. And that's not because they don't want to help all ages of children. It's because their room is limited until they get into the new building. Also, they got the plans for a new building and for a mobile unit, a bus that has a where they have what they need for pregnancy tests on board, and a what do you call that machine for sonograms? I'm drawing a blank, but the machine that'll ultrasound. They have an ultrasound machine also on the mobile unit. So looking at having a mobile unit, a new building, and all of that sometime in the next year and a half, and wanting to expand and be able to help more people. But currently they have supplies for children up to 3, and they have diapers, formula, breastfeeding classes, you name it. They also do aside from I'm messing my words up. Aside from pregnancy tests, they do STIs, which is similar to STDs, but not. It's infections, sexually transmitted infections, not diseases like HIV, but things like gonorrhea, chlamydia. They can test for those for free if you're a woman, and for free for men if you're a student. Or I don't remember what all the stipulations are, but anyhow, enough about True Choice. I just wanted to explain the shirt, why I'm wearing it, what it's for. It's advertising for a ministry that I believe in. If you even if you don't live in this area, you want to support a good ministry that's pro-life, that's a good one. Okay, to our lesson. We are studying through the letter that Paul wrote to Colossae. In my studies, I've found Paul very likely wrote a letter also to Laodicea, but we don't know what's happened to that. And he intended these letters to be used back and forth. The one he wrote to Laodicea should have been read at Colossae and vice versa, and both letters should have been read at Hierapolis. Hierapolis, I think is the way you say that. So these are all little towns near to each other in Asia Minor. And we talked about that. Okay, we left off. We did the first 10 verses of chapter 3. I'll reread verse 10, which says, "And have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him." And we do understand that we were made in the image of Almighty God. And we put on new man when we get saved. We're supposed to. Now, he's been talking since verse 1 about characteristics of someone who follows Jesus. Not to be confused with asceticism and the traditions that false teachers were trying to lay on them to achieve salvation or somehow gain God's favor. These verses instead talk about how we become somebody entirely different as Christians because we're saved, not so we'll get saved. In this illustration, these doctrinal truths are they exemplify what a Christian, a man who is saved or a woman who is saved, how they will begin to behave. So in verse 10, again, he says, you put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge, which only true knowledge only comes from the Lord, just like true choices are godly choices. I love how I got to work that in. So, but have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, but Christ is all and in all. Now that's an important verse, and I don't want to skim over it. Barbarian to the people Paul's writing to. Remember, Paul's writing to a group of people, and so his descriptions are going to be something they understood. It's not that Paul's calling people names. Barbarian wouldn't even have been a name. Then it would have been a descriptive term. But a barbarian to the Greeks and to the Romans would have been someone who didn't speak the main language, which was Greek at the time. But a barbarian wouldn't speak Greek or Latin or any of the more common languages. A barbarian would be somebody who had a native tongue and who lived simple and probably completely unhellenized. So that's who he's referring to when he says barbarian. But this is interesting. He goes on to say Scythian. I looked that up. By all accounts, Scythians were a little better than beasts. We would call them savages. We would call them natives. And I'm not talking about any particular group like Native Americans or Native Australians like Aborigines. I'm talking about in general. The people from Papua New Guinea, the original settling people there, we call them natives. Well, not all natives act like animals, but the Scythians did. Scythians were a little better than wild beasts. They were brutal. They were barbaric. You would probably associate what we call a barbarian today to the Scythians. That's not what Paul meant, but he was just saying as far into depravity as you can go. Whether you be a barbarian or a Scythian, the Lord can still save you. And that's what he's trying to say. Scythians were originally from an area just south of what is today known as Russia, modern-day Russia, and possibly Mongolia. We think of Genghis Khan and what a barbarian he was. If you don't know who Genghis Khan is, you should look him up. He was a spaz. he was something else. But anyway, not to get into history, just to understand, he's talking about men and their depravity, and their levels of civilization and their levels of knowledge. And he's trying to say it doesn't matter who you are. The Lord will create somebody new in you, and your identity will be found in Christ, and Christ's identity found in you, and you'll become one. When you get saved, the Lord moves in, and he starts remodeling, so to speak. So he says, where there's neither Greek nor Jew, because those were two civilized groups of the time, depending on your perspective, who was more, he doesn't mention Romans at all, which I think is interesting, but he says, where there's neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free. Now here he's talking about those who are free, and that would be Romans. Romans at this time were free and had citizenship. Paul himself was a Roman and also a Jew. But he says that whether you're free or you're bond, and that means a bond servant, somebody who's in a form of slavery or subservience. Now, there's a difference, and I want to make this clear. There's a difference between being a servant and being a slave. And I make that distinction because of the modern day word is it's so charged with it's one of those words that just it's reactionary, and it causes so many people to get upset that you just have to be careful when you use words that have that effect on people. So I want to be clear about the difference between a servant and a slave. A servant is someone who, even if they're, no matter, they're either indebted and they're working off a debt, or they're getting paid. They're like hired help, but they do receive something for their labor. They either get paid, or they get a debt removed, or they get lodging, they get fed, they get taken care of. There's some arrangement for a servant. The servant is in some sort of an agreement, and sometimes those agreements pass down from one generation to the other, but however it came to be, there is a symbiotic relationship there where both parties benefit to some degree. Now, it may be that the master is being, I don't like that word master, but the Bible uses it, that it may be that one benefits more than the other, but it is a beneficial relationship. Slavery, on the other hand, could get pretty bad. A person who is a slave, it was much less symbiotic and almost completely one-sided. Many slaves didn't eat well, didn't receive very good treatment, and I'm not talking about American slavery by any means. I'm talking about worldwide slavery throughout history, various forms of it. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on any one genre of it. I'm talking about slavery in general. So please don't take anything I say that may not be completely historically accurate and use it as a reason to get mad at me. I'm not trying to teach a history lesson. I'm trying to explain what the Bible's talking about, so that we, I was always taught to define your terms. Once you've defined your terms, then you can understand what it is that you're studying. So we're just defining terms here. But he says, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free. And I think bond there is talking about servants, but it extends to slavery as well. And all Paul is saying is it doesn't matter your station in life. He's not saying it's okay to own slaves, and nobody should ever say that. What he's saying is whatever station you find yourself in, whatever level of education that you find that you have, whatever your situation, your particular personal relationship is, the Lord can save you and will save you. So I'll reread the verse and we'll move on. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, Christ is all and in all. When it says in all, it means when you get saved, He's inside you, and it doesn't matter who that you are. The Lord can save anybody. Verse 12, put on, therefore, as the elect of God. Now He's calling people from each of these groups the elect of God. And Paul talks about election a lot. And I don't have a problem with the word election or predestination, because I understand them to work together what word I'm looking for. But I understand them to work. It's right on the tip of my brain. In concert, I guess, with God's foreknowledge. God's foreknowledge and God's predestination they work hand in hand, because God already knows what's going to happen. He can predestine things, but well, I don't want to get off on predestination. I just want you to understand when He says God's elect, He's talking about those that are saved, and He does not predetermine that based on. Again, I'm not going to get into this right now, but what I'm saying is it doesn't take away our free will, and people who lean on that are misunderstanding what election is, what predestination is. God gives us His choice. He just happens to know what our choice is going to be. So He can plan around it. We cannot. We still have to make those decisions, and God still knows what they'll be. Anyway, put on therefore as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercy, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, and long-suffering. He's telling us, as this new person, whether you be any of these that he mentioned, barbarian, Scythian, or the others, you're supposed to be holy and beloved, and put on bowels of bowels of mercies, which means an abundance of mercies from inside, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, and long-suffering. One of the good things about this True Choice organization is they exhibit these things when they reach out to help people from all walks of life. They don't care what color you are. They don't care what your situation is, how you became pregnant in the first place, whether you were raped in some really awful manner, or whether you were just careless and ungodly. They don't care. They want to save the life, and they want to help the mom and dad win their souls, or save their souls and come to know Jesus. And that's how we're all to be. We're to exhibit these characteristics of God. Humbleness of mind is a big one. Meekness is a big one. And long-suffering, which is patience, is a big one. He says, forbearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. We're not taught that anymore. If you have a quarrel with somebody, it's get mad, get even, get away. It's always something negative. It's never forgive. And forgiving is hard, especially when something really heinous has been done. But hard or not, it's what we're supposed to do. Hey, Jesus forgave those that hung him on the cross, and he's our example. So that's what we're supposed to do. Turn that off. I apologize. Forget. Sometimes that's going on. All right. Verse 14, and above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also you are called in one body, and be ye thankful. There's a lot there. I don't know if I should cover it all, but I'll try, because we're going to come back over some of this. But he says, above all these put on charity, which is another word for godly love. We're to love one another. And he says that is the bond of perfectness. In love, all things are perfected and completed. It's in love that we do our best work as Christians. And I want you to understand, you can do a lot of good things without it, but your best work will always be done in love, not in pride, selfishness, arrogance, or any other way, but in love. He says, let the peace of God rule in your hearts. The only peace, the only real peace that there's ever been or ever will be is the peace of God. And only Christians can find it. Only a born-again believer can have that peace. And if you're saved, you can let that peace rule in your heart, as opposed to other things you can let rule in your heart. But as a Christian, you can let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also you're called in one body, and be ye thankful. Oh, please, find a way to be thankful for all that God has done for you. I wish the people out there marching in the streets, I'm not trying to minimize their cause, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a justifiable one, but I wish they'd find some time during their day to be thankful for what they have, and thankful for the right to protest or complain. I mean, the very freedoms they enjoy, they should be thankful for, because if they didn't have them, they wouldn't be able to have a voice at all. So we should be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching, admonishing one another in psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. I want to get more into the Psalms, and we'll do that, Lord willing, tomorrow. But I want you to know chapter 1, verses 15 through 20 may have been a song. I don't know that, but there's a lot of words in it that look like song lyrics or psalm lyrics, and I'll come back to that. But he's just saying, in order to help you stay centered and focused and remembering what God has done for us, remembering how to be thankful, you ought to have a song in your heart all the time. So he says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another, and not just in a form like I'm doing now, but in songs and hymns, spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. I love somebody who's got a song on their lips all the time. They're usually really just wonderful to be around. He says, whatsoever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him. All that we do, we ought to do in the name of the Lord. If you can't do what you're doing in the name of the Lord, you probably shouldn't be doing. If you can't have that drink or do that drug or practice that sexual sin or whatever sin it is, and in fact, I'm going to tell you, every sin that you commit, try doing it in the name of the Lord. You'll find out right quick something's got to give. You either have to give in to your sinful flesh, or you've got to glorify the Lord. You can't do both at the same time. So if we do all things in the name of the Lord, it might help eradicate and mortify some of the sin that we have in our lives. And so I hope that will help somebody. That'd be a good focus for every day, is to try to do all things in the name of the Lord. And when you find yourself doing things you ought not be doing, you'll figure out you can't do those in the name of the Lord, and maybe you'll quit doing those. So that's a good way to end right there. Let's focus on that. Let's try to have a good day in the Lord, show love, mercy, and patience to all people around us, and glorify God in all we do. And pray for me as I pray for you. And if you know somebody in need of True Choice in San Marcos, do please give them the information. There's going to be a new website and everything with this name, and that'll all be completely launched by August 1st. Between now and then, you can still, I think, find them under both names. So, all right. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.